Thank you everyone for attending this mastermind meeting. It's both an honor and a privilege to present our instructor Tom, who is going to be sharing his life story with us. And he promised to keep it under 30 minutes so that we wouldn't all go to sleep. As we all know, Tom is a highly intelligent and experienced individual with about 30 plus years in the real estate industry. And not just that, something to do with selling horses and
coaching football, and teaching school,
coaching foosball,
and working on a farm.
Yes, all
whatever
that.
else you want to know.
And so I'm going to stop rambling so that he can start.
All right,
Tom, thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. All right, I want to start with this. The first time I came in here, I sat through one of these, and I sat, back where you're sitting or wherever, and I said, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. I really did. I said, what in the world is wrong with these people,
Too many things to name.
Yeah, and then, another week I sat through another one, and I got thinking, these people really know each other, and they really care about each other. And they're serious about it. There's just not a bunch of baloney. They really do care about each other, and they really do work together. And they're all in this thing together. And then part of it is because of this. So here we go. Since I'm 80 years old, I'll take twice as long to tell you my life story because I've lived twice as long as any of you in here. At least. At least. All right? I was born January 17th, 1937.
Whoa.
In Stanton, Virginia, which is in the western part of the state. In the Shenandoah Valley, if any of you are familiar with that. I grew up on a big farm, 450-acre farm. Had beef cattle, part of it. Dairy cattle, had a dairy barn, dairy cattle, part of it. All right, we had a lot of horses as a hobby. And we trained horses. And I grew up that way. We never had any money. We never had any money. We had food, because my mother had a garden about half as big as a football field, and she canned everything. This was before deep freezes, as you people are familiar with. She canned everything, and we had plenty of food. We ate well, but we had no money. Had no money to do anything. I can go back in the farming industry before people were using tractors. When I was a little boy, we did everything with horses, and we trained horses, worked horses, those kind of things. And that was all part of it. And from the time I was a little bitty boy until I was about 8 years old, I stayed home and played all the time. But it was during World War II. I didn't play with many toys because they didn't make toys during World War II. Everything went into the war industry. We lived 10 miles from town. We could go to town once a week because gas was rationed, and that's all the gas stamps you can get was enough to get to town once a week. So we'd go to town once a week, buy things there. Guess how we learned about the war news? Every Saturday night we stayed in town and went to the movies. The reason we did, because of the war news. They told you the news about World War II. See, none of you guys are familiar with any of this. All right? But that's how we learned about the war news. My mother was the second oldest of 13 kids. She had 9 brothers. 7 of them fought in World War II. One of them was a German prisoner for a year and a half. Wow. So we had to keep up with the war news, and we knew a lot about the war. But when I was about 9 years old, I started going over to the farm. We lived in a little village, and the farm was a mile and a half away. I started going to the farm with my father. And I got introduced to this. Anybody know what that is?
Stool.
It's a stool. Is that right? When I was about 9 years old, he set that stool down beside a cow.
Milk the cow.
And he said, milk the cows. And I learned to milk cows. And I went to the barn every morning, 7 days. He milked those old cows 7 days a week, twice a day. So I went to the barn, milked cows, 6 o'clock in the morning, caught the school bus about 7:45 to go to school. And that was my introduction to work. And I've carried this thing around with me all my life. I've done a lot of jobs. I always carry this thing around with me, and I carry it around for one big reason. Hey, this is where it started. Get your butt on that stool, milk that cow. That's where it started. So I carry that around with me just to remind me that it's work.
Could you hold it and show the camera?
I'll show it to whatever you want to show. It's a milking stool. You sit it down beside a cow. You sit on it to milk. If the cow kicks, you reach under it and grab the stool and jerk the stool away first. so you don't upset the milk bucket, if you can help. But I've had it forever. It's been in my office. When I worked for another company, it was in my office. When I coached football and taught school, it was in my office. It's always been with me. It's always been with me. Just to remind you that there's work out there, people. There's a lot of work. All right? So I grew up on a farm. Working on a farm was hard work. None of you, I don't think, are familiar with working on a farm, but there was a lot of hay to be made. There was a lot of corn to be picked. A lot of other work to do. A lot of stalls to be cleaned in the horse barn and all that.
Tell us about the bales.
Huh?
Tell us about the bales.
Baling hay, we to begin with, when I was a kid, we didn't have bales. That was before balers. It was loose hay. You put it on with a pitchfork. But baling hay, the hay balers most people have is the bales are about this long and about this thick, and they weigh about 80 to 100 pounds. And when you throw maybe 2,000 of those a day, at times in 90-some degree weather, you learn what work is. It's, you know, my dad taught me what work was, the hard way. So, one thing I learned about farming though, by the time I was about 15 years old, I said, I'm not going to be a farmer. I am not going to be a farmer. Well, what are you going to do? My mother was real sick. My father had to take care of my mother. We had 3 hired hands, and we worked with them and everything. But when I got to high school, the farming got slipped away just a little bit because I played sports. I played football, basketball, baseball in high school. I was good at all 3 of them. I was a quarterback in football. I had a chance to play pro baseball. When I was 16 years old, I was playing in a summer pro league at home. The guy that played second base, the guy that played first base was a former big leaguer. The guy at shortstop was a former big leaguer. So they taught me a lot of baseball. By the time I was 18, I was hitting over 400 in high school. And the pro prospects came around, the pro scouts came around. They actually offered me $85 a month one time to sign a pro, old Washington Senators, $85 a month to sign a pro baseball contract. Now, gosh, I think I could do better than that on the farm. I had no ambition to go to college. I was going to sign a pro baseball contract. My dad needed me on the farm, so I said, I'm going to stay on the farm. And this is how life is, and some of you, I know, had things like this happen. You know how it's all timing? It's all how things happen. I'm playing a summer pro baseball game one night, and I'm standing in the batter's box. I was 18 years old, and I just graduated from high school. The catcher looked up at me and said, where are you going to college? I said, I'm not going. I don't have any money, and I couldn't get a scholarship, and I couldn't get a pro contract. So I think I'm just going to help my dad out on the farm. They need me there. And this was, say, the first week in August. He says, why don't you come to Charlottesville, Virginia, which was 80 miles from home. Come to Charlottesville and talk to me. I want to take you and meet somebody. Well, make a long story short, the catcher for the other team was the assistant baseball coach at Virginia. He took me to see the dean of admissions at the University of Virginia on, I think, the 19th of August. School started right after Labor Day. I had a meeting with the dean of admissions. He says, come on. So the day after Labor Day, I went to college. University of Virginia, had no clue. Man, that's a big school. Academic, tough school. No clue. So I went to college and I played baseball there. And the more I stayed, the more I liked it. I had an uncle that was athletic director at the local high school there. And after my second year at UVA, I started going out there on a part-time basis in the fall, helping him coach football. When I was 19 years old, I was coaching, or 20 years old rather, I was coaching defensive backs and wide receivers on a high school football team. The kids were almost as old as I was. But it was fun. And I was a history major in college. I said, you know, if I ever get any money, I'd like to go to law school. I had no money, I hardly had enough money to get through the undergraduate degree. So I wound up very interested in coaching, and after college, I wound up coaching. But when I say I had no money, I mean I literally had no money in college. I was on a partial baseball scholarship to pay some of my tuition. I worked for my meals. Here's what I did for my meals. It was a big cafeteria, and every night after the cafeteria closed, a couple of us would move all of the tables on one side of the cafeteria to the other side, and we mopped this floor over here. And then we'd sit there and eat our dinner while it dried, and we'd move them all back over here. And we mopped this part of the floor over here, and we'd wait till that dried. Well, it was 10 or 11 o'clock when we got out of there. usually, and you still had to study and everything. Well, heck, I was in school, and I was grade-wise doing pretty good and everything, so shoot, I was where I wanted to be. I, like I said, couldn't get in law school anyway, probably. I got out of University of Virginia in 1960. Took me an extra half a year because I didn't take enough classes, a couple of semesters, because I couldn't. All right. I needed a job. This is what I did for my first job. There were 140 school districts in the state of Virginia at that time. I wrote a form letter and sent a form letter to all 140 school districts in the state with my resume in there and so forth. I got a call back from, I think, 3 of them, and I went to work for one of them, teaching and being an assistant baseball coach. I taught history. After a year of that, I left and went to another school where I got a better teaching job and a better coaching job, and make a long story short, 3 years into the business, I was a head track coach and assistant football coach at a real good high school back home. And in that time, I met my wife, number one. That was an interesting story. A friend of mine and I were sitting in a little restaurant across the street from the school, and we wanted to go out to this place to go swimming that afternoon out in the country. His name was Dickie, and Dickie said, I tell you what let's do. Let's ask the next 2 girls to come in here if they want to go swimming this afternoon. I said, all right, let's do that. He said, I'll ask first when you ask the second one. Okay. Here they came across the street, 2 of them. Good looking, both of them. Well, the one that I liked was in front. The one I liked was in the back, rather. But when they got to the door, she held the door open for the other one. So the one that came in second became my first wife. And we were married for 22 years and had 4 kids. And I've had some tough times. My oldest son was 10 days from going to college, got killed in an automobile accident. And so went through that. 1983, got divorced. My ex-wife, by then I had put her through school, literally. And she had 2 degrees and almost had a doctorate. And she met a visiting professor from Australia. And she let me know that she was leaving and going to Australia. So she went to Australia, and I had a kid in high school and 2 kids in elementary school. So I had kids to raise. I had my father and my stepmother right down the road, so they helped and all that sort of stuff. But from there, from the time I got out of school to that, I was training horses on the side at night. My friend and I, who were still friends, my friend and I were training and selling a few horses all the time. We'd train them in the middle of the night sometimes and everything. I was refereeing high school and college basketball for a long, long period of time. That was always fun. Did that. And then the funny story about wife number 2. I'd been divorced for a couple of years. And 2 friends of mine and I were working a basketball game in Towson, Maryland. And somehow or another, the subject got around to people you used to know. And a couple of days before that, my 9-10-year-old daughter wanted a playroom. So we went into the garage and found a place where she could have her dolls and all that stuff. And there was a trunk in there. What's in the trunk, Daddy? What's in the trunk? So I got a hammer, we knocked the trunk open. I found a shoebox full of old letters from a girl I went with in college. I threw 4 or 5 of them in my travel bag. I go up there to work the ball game. After the game, we're sitting there having a beer or 2, and the subject came around to people you used to know. And I said, look here. I handed my good friend, who's dead now, Billy Martz, I handed Billy the letter, and Billy said, well, what's this? I said, this is a letter that I got from a girl I used to know about 25 years ago. And he started laughing. He reads the letter, and then there was a phone number in the letter. And Billy said, well, let's just call her up. I said, I got a phone number here. Is this ridiculous? You can't make this stuff up. So Billy gets the bartender to give him a phone and looks in the phone book and gets an area code, because there wasn't area codes in 1959. Gets an area code, puts the area code in front of this phone number. And to make a long story short, we got in touch with her. And she says, who's this? And jokingly, I said, this is a voice from your past. And she says, I was just thinking about you the other day. I said, what? I said, what? She said, I was thinking about you the other day. Make a long story short, she never married. She taught 30 couple years at Westfield High School. She was still teaching when we first met, and she said, if you ever want to come on up, I'll take you into New York. Well, that's country. I didn't know anything about New York, so I came up. Make a longer story short, 2 years later, we'd missed about 3 weekends of either me coming here or her going there or meeting in Baltimore or something, and we decided to get married. So I come up here in 1986. Brought 2 little kids with me, had no job, retired from teaching, had no clue what I was going to do. I mean, really no clue. I didn't know. She said, well, let's rent a house for a year and we'll find you something to do. I walked in a Weichert office and looking for a house to rent. I met the manager of that Weichert office. He said, why don't you get a real estate license? I said, I don't know anything about real estate. I don't know anything. I said, I've sold horses. That's the only thing I've ever sold. And he said, no, I'll teach you how to do it. I said, okay. So I got a real estate license. I worked in Westfield for about, I guess, almost 4 years in the real estate business. First year I was in the business, don't want to discourage you, but the first year I was in the business, I made absolutely no money. But I kept looking for buyers and sellers down at Monmouth Park at the racetrack and Freehold and all those places where there was a racetrack. Couldn't find any houses to sell there, so that didn't work. So when I finally got serious about it, the second year I was in the business, I made $90,000. That was 1987. And that, for the price of houses then and everything, that was pretty good. A year later, this guy got a vice president's job at Morris Plains at headquarters, and he says, come on, I got a job for you. And for the next almost 20 years, or not 20 years, 12, 13 years, every time he said, I got a job for you, I just went and did it. I wound up starting a field training program. What I'm teaching you now, I started on a field training program in 1990 couple, and I took it office to office. We got some national recognition for it. It was a good program. They still use a lot of it. So that was pretty much what I did in the real estate business. Real estate business, you said tell them this, but I know what to tell them, but I'll tell them anyway. Real estate business killed me once. I had an open house. I had an open house. And I was sitting in an open house. I was by myself, and I kept having, man, I don't feel good. I kept having chest pains. And I said, I'm going to pass out. And I staggered out into the yard, passed out in the front yard. Runner came by, found me, called 911. On the way up to Overlook Hospital, the guy in the ambulance said, I can't get a pulse. Can you get a pulse? To the other guy. I was talking to the other guy. He said, I don't have a pulse. You have a pulse? And I'm hearing this. And I said, this doesn't sound right to me. But they couldn't get a pulse for a little bit. So I guess that's what dying means. I didn't see any big black hole or any of that stuff. But it's really strange. You're lying there and somebody's talking about, he doesn't have any pulse. I can't get a pulse. So, like I said, real estate killed me one time, but I made a comeback and all that. So it was a pretty good job, pretty good life. 2009 I retired. Carol retired. We've been married 31 years. We go places together. We do things together. We try to stay in decent physical shape. And, you know, who knows from here? I found this place, and I tell you what, I love it here. I love you guys. It's so much fun. I have so much fun here. It's unbelievable. But that's pretty much life history. That's me. If you ever want to train horses or
did you just get teary-eyed on that?
I always do. I always do, buddy. I always do. When you've been through all this mess that I've been through, and you have,
and I'm sure you're skipping over a lot of details.
Oh my gosh, I don't have an hour. I can't.
We got time. We got time.
No, you don't.
No, Tom.
Oh, I could tell you tons of stories about basketball and officiating, football, coaching, training horses, getting bucked off of horses, getting kicked by horses. I can tell you all sorts of stories, but I don't have all that.
Answer some of the questions that.
Yeah, ask me a question. I'll try to answer. Yeah, here.
So I'm not gonna have a question. Oh, well, I got a question, but so I met Tom in we go to the same gym, and one time we were in the hot tub. I think Tom asked me what I do, and I told him, I'm a realtor. So then that's when he started the dialogue thing with me. And like he would give me tips. Every time I would see him, I would pick his brain. And then I came back to Lou, I'm like, Lou, this guy's, you know, really good at what he does. You should really sit down and talk with him. And just always like a genuine, upbeat, happy guy, positive attitude.
Always.
Doesn't let age get in his way. He's always in the gym, crushing the gym, whether he's complaining about how they just changed the setup. But
That's a mess in there,
he's
ain't it?
in there putting in work.
Absolutely.
But I know, like for me, you know, starting out with Lou and a combination of between you and Lou has really stepped my game up.
That's good. That's
a
good.
couple notches.
You know, that's what makes this enjoyable for me. What makes it enjoyable for me now, I mean, I've been there, done that, made mine and all that sort of thing. But when I hear people come in, hey, you know what Sophie came in and told me this morning? I got a home inspection. I said, oh God, you sold something. What? That's great, you know. But that's what makes it fun for me. I coached football, high school football for 30 years. I got in the Hall of Fame there a few years ago, and I made my little speech based on it's not about me. Because I had an uncle who told me, I asked my uncle one time when I first started coaching, I said, how do you know when you're a good coach? He said, 20 or 30 years down the road, they'll tell you. And I said, they? He said, yeah, your former players. When you see this one's a lawyer, this one's a surgeon, this has made up $umpteen million, this one has done this one has done that. And so when I got in the Hall of Fame, I had about 8 of my former players that were really successful were there. And I made my speech based on Mike sitting over here, and you know Mike worked as a farm hand when he was a kid, had no money. And what do you own now, Mike? 3 farms? And that sort of thing. I based the whole thing on that. And that's, to me, that's what it's all about. I have always been a coach, always been a trainer, always, always. That's what I do best. That's what I do best. So the key, you know, you take something that you really like, that you know, and you get to a point where you can do it better. God, I can do this better than most people. You know, and I look to the future. Even now, I look to the future. I look at Lewis and I say, you know what I'm going to say about Lewis? One of these days when I get really old, I'm going to say, I knew him when. And that's about the way it always is for me. So, question?
I'm sure there will be. What was your, that was a heart attack you had?
Yeah.
Was it attributed to stress? Or
Probably.
was it-
I was working too hard. That's probably what it was. And I was a little overweight. But that's probably what it was. I don't really know. It's funny, my dad lived to be 93 and he worked the week he died. My mother's side of the family, all of the men had heart attacks and died in their 70s. All of her brothers died in their 70s. And so, you know, it might be hereditary, it might be, I don't know what it was.
I don't think hard work would kill you. I think hard work would keep you young. But I think the way you handle
Oh, yeah.
hard work is
Oh, yeah.